Hello and welcome to Hot Topic. I'm Hugh Richards. This week I'm with two of our South Bank parliamentarians, Austin Mitchell, Labour MP for Great Grimsby, and Martin Vickers, Conservative MP for Cleethorpes and Immingham. And it's been a while since we've been together, gents. Thank you very much for coming in. First question, I'll ask you, Martin, first. Would you lend a fiver to the Greek government?
Probably not to the government, no. I mean, it's a terribly sad situation for the Greek people who find themselves having lost their pensions and all sorts of benefits. But I'm afraid they've managed their economy in an appalling way over many, many years. Whether the EU has helped is open to debate, but I'm afraid, I suspect that in the not too distant future they're going to be extremely disappointed with their new government.
Well, Austin, if I have a democratic mandate, should I be forgiven my debts?
Well, I think the debts will have to be written off. They can't go on paying debts which are about 186% of GDP forever and imposing this kind of harsh austerity forever. They've a massive unemployment rate of 25%. It's time they revolted. I'm glad they revolted. I'm not sure that Mrs. Merkel will do anything about it. She doesn't want to write off the debt, and it's difficult to make concessions to Greece that you don't make to Portugal and Italy and Spain and the others. So it really is a problem. But I think it'll be ended in the usual fashion with some euro fudge somewhere, in which they won't write off the debt, but it'll be extended into the year 20,622.
You're both Eurosceptic members of Parliament. You mentioned Spain and Italy and Portugal as well. It's the southern European countries in which we join in the European Union are in a horrible state. Greece, we know, Spain has a 50% unemployment, a 50% youth unemployment rate and a 25% unemployment rate. This is a recipe for revolution, especially in hot countries.
Well, it has that potential. One would hope that the democratic process can somehow come to terms with it over the next few years. But it's going to be extremely challenging, and I don't think there is anyone, even in the countries concerned, actually readily foresees exactly how it's going to play out. And of course, in Spain, you've got the independence movements as well in the regions and so on. So it's going to be a real challenge for European governments and for the Eurozone countries. I agree with Austin. I mean, clearly the debts are not going to be paid off, certainly in our lifetimes, and they will go on. It's a bit like the Humber Bridge, really. You know, governments came in, wrote a little off, and yet the debt carried on increasing. It's madness.
The Humber Bridge model for banking will be one that I remember for a long time.
It's a possible situation because they won't give up the euro, and yet they can't make it work. And if it doesn't work, it persecutes the southern, weaker, uncompetitive states, well, like Italy and Spain and Portugal and Greece. The euro would only work if there's a machinery of redistribution, which Germany won't pay for, so they can't have it, and if they have a central budget and a central economic policy, which France won't agree to. So they're stuck. It'll go on turning Europe into the kind of high unemployment, low growth black spot, dragging us down with it.
It just shows the inbuilt failures within the system. You cannot combine the economies, as Austin has said. I know Greece, Finland, Spain, all these countries where the economy is at a different stage of development, and you cannot lock it into the same exchange rates and so on. And it shows the wisdom of Austin and my position over very many years.
I'm sure just to agree with each other.
Not taking any satisfaction in that.
Turn on each other.
Well, just on that issue, just one more thing, because you'll be much more knowledgeable than I am. If Greece does withdraw from the euro, or if the euro collapses as a currency, what's the consequence for us? Austin?
Well, it won't collapse. I think probably Greece won't withdraw. They'd have to restore the drachma and write off their debts, have to renege on their debts if they're going to withdraw, and I don't think they'll want to do that. So the consequences for us are that the euro will carry on, and it will drag Europe down, and our trade with Europe will be hit, and 50% of our business is with Europe, and that the euro will fall and become even more competitive to the pound. So our exports to Europe will suffer. So that's the consequences, and that will go on. Europe should sort itself out, but it won't. It can't.
Staying with the European issue in a slightly different angle, Amjad Bashir was elected last May as member of the European Parliament for Yorkshire and Humber for UKIP. Last week he defected to the Conservatives. How welcome is he with you, Martin?
Another member of the party in what is our Yorkshire and Humber region is obviously very welcome, and he's obviously seen the reality that the only way he's going to get and anyone who's tempted by UKIP is going to get a EU referendum is with a Conservative majority government.
Conservative members of Parliament, when they want to the Westminster Parliament, and they want to defect to UKIP, they resign their seats and stand again for election. Would it not be more democratic if Amjad Bashir resigned his MEP seat and stood again for election as a Conservative?
Well, of course, they have this bizarre system in this appalling electoral system we have for the EU. Of course, the next person on the list climbs the ladder, and without any election, someone else emerges as an MEP. It's totally undemocratic.
It's a matter of total unimportance. I don't know why you even bothered to raise it.
Well,
the man is attacked by both sides. UKIP says is undesirable. Tories say is marvellous. There's this kind of intermittent incest going on between the two parties. I hope they enjoy it.
I don't think they're closely enough related quite to be incestuous. But one of the parties, UKIP, it does seem to be full of absolute eccentrics, doesn't it? This keeps happening to UKIP. They put together that they're the great threat to the mould of British politics, and then somebody among their ranks says something silly.
Well, perhaps even more importantly, the fact that they have some rather eccentric members is the fact that they have no policies. The chap who was writing their manifesto had to give up. Everyone knows that they stand for an EU referendum. What is their pensions, housing, transport, education policies? It's a blank sheet of paper.
Well, if you have these flash-in-the-pan parties suddenly emerging, you're bound to get funny people involved, as the Liberals did when they were the flash in the pan in '83 and in the last election.
The Liberals have been going since the late 17th century, Austin.
I don't think it's any problem. It's fun.
It adds to the joy of the nation.
The gaiety of the nation.
I want to talk about our economy, Austin. All the numbers seem to be coming right.
Well, no, they're not really, because we can't pay our way in the world, and we're accumulating debt, and we're having to sell off bits of the country, businesses, houses, flats, farms, whatever, to pay the trade deficit we're accumulating because we don't produce and export enough. So the economy is on a downhill slide. It's sustained by buoyant and ever-rising house prices at the moment, and that's making people feel good. But I think we're moving towards a low wage, uncertain employment economy, and that's not going to be good for any, because the cost of living is still rising more than incomes. People are worse off now than they were in 2008. So it's not going to produce a great feel-good feeling.
Martin,
well, after
the Chancellor's screwing up the economy.
Well, clearly I would reject that, and you said it. The numbers are going in the right way. I mean, it is true that household budgets are still squeezed, and people are only just beginning to get the feel-good factor back. But after 3 or 4 years of very deep recession, it's inevitable that wages have slipped behind prices. They are now catching up, as the figures indicate. And the most important thing, I think, is the unemployment rate is going down. But inflation is very modest, below 1% now.
Martin, now we can disagree on that. I mean, if you keep interest rates pretty well at zero for 10 years nearly, if you print £375 billion worth of money and shove it into the banks, if you don't get growth, well, you really are sunk. So this is not a consequence of a long-term economic plan. It's a consequence of the Bank of England pulling all the stops out.
Which was a part of the long-term economic plan.
But just on the economic, household budget's still being squeezed, but so much of the employment that's being created is 0 hours contractor employment, which provides no security.
There's some truth in that, and I think the important thing is where zero contracts, our contracts do exist, that they are properly regulated. I mean, they do suit some people. It's not a blanket thing that they are bad, full stop. They do suit the working circumstances of some people. And what is important, of course, is that rogue employers are properly regulated and prosecuted where necessary if they're exceeding the bounds of what's reasonable.
Britain now needs a wage increase. We need a higher minimum wage and we need a living wage. And I think unless you get a wage increase, this is for the public sector as well as the private sector, you're not going to generate demand sufficient to stimulate the whole economy to grow.
But if you don't have a wage increase, then it does keep prices down, though, doesn't it? I mean, I know people are at risk of deflation.
It just makes people miserable.
But it does mean that there's a risk of deflation rather than inflation.
Prices are coming down. The price of petrol has fallen, for instance. But it's not a substitute for actually getting growth in the economy and getting more people to work and paying them more money to spend and buy things so that we can make things to satisfy that demand.
We'll just have to stop there, gents. Please come back after this break. Welcome back. I'm still with Martin Vickers, Conservative MP for Cleethorpes and Immingham, and Austin Mitchell, Labour MP for Great Grimsby. Gentlemen, you'll have noticed that there's a general election on the horizon.
No,
So
really?
it's only a rumour.
Well, I'm sure I have corroborating evidence, one aspect of which is the fact that everybody keeps talking about it. These television debates, the Prime Minister, the Conservative Prime Minister, clearly doesn't really want to take part. What's he frightened of?
Well, I think the debates will happen at some point. I mean, the reality, of course, is the only one that would really matter would be Cameron against Miliband. One of them is going to be Prime Minister, and I think it looks like we're probably going to end up a debate with about 8 or 10 people in it, which even if it lasts for 2 hours, is going to generate very much heat and very little light.
But why is Cameron so reluctant? I mean, he's finding all these excuses. It's got to have the Greens, it's got to have the Democratic Unionist Party, which only stands in Northern Ireland. Why is he looking for these rather pathetic excuses not to take part? He's a perfectly good speaker.
Well, exactly. He can handle himself perfectly well. He would come over with the full authority that any Prime Minister sort of has inbuilt in. I don't know the exact reasons why they're prevaricating. They'll certainly take place in the end, and the sooner that we get to the end of this particular saga of yes I will, no I won't, the better.
Austin, your man Ed Miliband, confident about his performance in a
Well,
debate?
the opposition is always eager to get on because it puts them on equal terms with the Prime Minister. I think we should have leadership debates. I think they're a right of the electorate, and I think we'd be behind the rest of the world in introducing them in this country. I don't want to see them stop now, but there should be leadership debates between the two people who can form a government.
Yes.
That's the criteria. I don't see that they should include the Liberals because last time, I mean, it's easy for the third party to make promises and say, oh, it'll be marvellous and they're all fantastic. We can do all these things that these two parties can't do.
Yeah.
And that's what Clegg did last time and why suddenly we had Clegg mania and now why they're in the mess they are. So a leadership debate between two leaders who can form a government. I don't mind, as well as that, a kind of all come, all served mess with everybody shouting at each other. It might be fun. A crowd spectacular.
I should just do a little advertising here. Hot Topic will be doing special editions in all 13 constituencies reached by S3 TV, to which
Of every candidate?
well, we will have invited every candidate. Can't guarantee that they're all going to turn up, but over the coming month, the weeks approaching the election, we'll be hot topicing.
Right, well,
at
invite
the
the ex-MPs if the candidates don't turn up.
Austin, you are always welcome under any circumstances. One of the big issues in this general election is clearly going to be the NHS, and that's the issue that the Labour Party particularly wants to push, Austin. But there's a bit of a split in the Labour Party, isn't there, between Andy Burnham, who thinks that everything has to be provided by the NHS, and ex-junior health ministers like Lord Darzai, who recently said that he thinks that a private provision of NHS services is a much better way of going.
Well, he would think that, wouldn't he? Because he practices private medicine to a degree. No, I think the big problem with the NHS is, which is in difficulties at the moment, is extra funding. And I think we've got to provide extra funding. I'd like to see it come from an increase in national insurance charges, as Gordon Brown carried them last time. But it's going to need 20 billion more in about 8 years' time than it gets now. Where's that money going to come from? It'll have to come from somewhere.
And the answer is where?
Well, I don't want more private practice, but we did, as Labour government, the private enterprise to remedy the deficiencies. Just now, the Tories want to do it on a bigger scale, and I don't think that's a good idea.
Nothing is closer to the soul of the Labour Party than the NHS. Is it splitting the party to some extent?
No, the Labour Party, the NHS is part of our national fabric. It is a national system, and it's, I think, in advance of the rest of the world, where people have to pay in various ways. And I don't want a situation where you've got surgeons in Grimsby saying, well, if you want this operation, you'll have to wait 6 months in pain, but if you do it now and pay me, we can have it done immediately. I don't want that situation.
Martin, the NHS has suffered over the last 5 years of this Conservative-led government, hasn't it? I mean, Aneurin Bevan, a great, I'm sure, a predecessor of Austin's as a Labour MP, said that illness is not a crime to be punished or an indulgence to be paid for. It's a misfortune to be shared. Is that the view of the Conservative Party?
Well,
You say the health service is under
pressure. Yes, the pressure is going to mount whichever party is in power because of the
longer lifespans. I was at Scunthorpe Hospital today
when in the neonatal unit,
one of the babies was born after
25 weeks. I mean, that would not have been possible even a relatively short time ago. So those pressures are going to increase. I mean, Austin mentioned in introducing the private sector. Well, of course, actually, the coalition government has slowed down the involvement of the private sector because it went up to 4.9% under Labour, and it's now gone up a further 1%. So it's a nonsense to sort of try and introduce the word privatisation into the debate as Ed Miliband is. Quite simply, it's not that. Privatisation is what we did to companies like BT, sold them off lock, stock and barrel, not introduce a different contractor. And of course, it's not just former junior health spokesmen from the Labour Party that have been critical, it's the actual former Health Secretary Alan Milburn who's also weighed into the argument.
One of the other, I mean, that's the NHS, but the Labour Party wants to talk about in the election. The Conservative Party has come up with its 6 great topics that it wants to discuss. And of course, the other parties have come up with their own one issue or more single-minded issue agendas. Is immigration going to be the big issue of this election? Is that what's going to win it for UKIP?
Well, it's a big issue in the minds of the electorate, and understandably so. What they're concerned about is what they see as immigrants who claim benefits after not contributing and so on. But I think when it comes down to it, the economy will dominate. But certainly the immigration is an issue on the doorstep, and I'm prepared to take it, full front, as it were. I mean, clearly there has been a failure by the coalition government to achieve what they set themselves as a target at the last election. I think it was probably, I mean, certainly with hindsight, it was the wrong target to go for because you can't regulate the number of people leaving the country. So, but the fact is that, I mean, it comes back to where we started, with the EU. While we remain members of the EU, we cannot regulate EU immigration.
Austin, Great Grimsby, your constituency, is one of the ones most attractive and most under threat to UKIP at the moment, and your successor as Labour candidate, Melanie Orne, is fighting UKIP as much as she's fighting the Conservatives. Will Labour be fighting on, and UKIP is fighting on immigration, not on Europe. Will Labour be fighting on the immigration issue?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I don't think it's a major issue. It's certainly an issue in people's heads, but it's exaggerated. The key thing, as Martin says, is that we should be able to control immigration from Europe. You can't have a tap which you can't switch off and you can't adjust for national needs. And what they're doing is cutting down immigration from the Commonwealth, and that includes Australia, New Zealand, Canada, white Commonwealth, and to make room for more people from Bulgaria and Romania, lovely as they are. So I think we need to be able to control both sides of immigration on the same basis. As Martin says, you can't control who leaves, but we should be able to control who comes in and what numbers and what skills into these overcrowded islands. But I don't think it's going to be a major issue. And I think, in terms of fighting UKIP, no, the Conservatives are the enemy and the Conservatives are the competition, and they're the only ones who can form an alternative government. We've got to beat them, not UKIP.
I'm going to bring it down much more locally now. You've both been doing work down in Westminster involving local trains, local infrastructure. And this is a particular subject of yours, Martin, what progress?
Well, we had a success with the campaign to maintain the through trains to Manchester. We now know that that service will be written into the new franchise. Austin and I, as well as our neighbouring colleagues, are still fighting to get the through trains to London. It's with the Radel regulator. We've just had some correspondence with him, and we've had to write again. The first reply was not particularly enlightening and helpful.
I agree with that.
Another area in which you agree.
They say they've got a number of applications for extra services, including one from Edinburgh, Blackpool, and all over the place. And they want to look at them all together. I say, and we say, that we should have the highest priority because we've been campaigning for it long enough. And look what Hull Trains have done for Hull, and see the opportunities for Grimsby, Cleethorpes, and for the biggest docks in the country.
I mean, there are already 2 trains an hour from London to Edinburgh. If there's a need for more, fine. Yeah. But, we've got none. We have a good service via Doncaster, but what we need is a through train.
And with the fact that if we get this renewable energy economy on the Humber here, that's an easy fight, isn't it? Nobody can say no to a through train.
Our prospects are good. We need a better rail service to fulfil them and to reach them.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to attract companies if their executives find difficulty in getting to London.
Yeah.
And getting to London and to the rest of the country as well, because of this idea of the Northern Powerhouse. It's going through to the west as well.
That's right. We need services to Leeds, for example, and other major centres.
One very quick question.
Hang on. The Northern Powerhouse is a load of northern crap. We aren't part of it. This is a big city monopoly trying to take devolution powers to big cities, which we'll lose ourselves.
Well, Austin, on that very definitive statement, I regret that we're going to have to stop. Thank you both so much for coming in. I hope you both enjoy the general election campaign coming up. That's all we have time for Hot Topic this time round. I'll see you again next week.